Now, one of the interesting aspects of human thinking is that we tend to make all sorts of assumptions about the things around us. Now, this is obviously very important because without this process of assumption making, our life would be chaotic. However, in terms of creative thinking, making assumptions and sticking to those assumptions and accepting those assumptions can be a real impediment to looking at things in new ways. So this next part that we're going to look at is about challenging assumptions about your particular task or about your particular topic. If we look at the chair as our example again, we might list a number of assumptions, and for the sake of the exercise we might ask that you list 100 assumptions. 100, interestingly enough, is because we want you to go past the obvious things. We can begin by looking at, say, assumptions about a chair in terms of how many legs it has. Usually a chair has 4 legs. Usually a chair is for sitting on.
Does that mean a cow is a chair?
Well, it could be. Usually a chair is a stable object. It sits on the ground.
Ah, it might be a cow then.
Well, it could be.
Or a horse.
Having gone through this process, we then begin to challenge some of these assumptions. So if we take the example that a chair normally has 4 legs,
yeah,
we might say, well, a chair might have 1 leg. Now, we know there are chairs that have 1 leg. We might say that a chair has no legs. Now, that might seem ridiculous to begin with, but if we actually look at it and explore it a little bit more, we might conceive the notion of a chair that maybe is suspended in some way, maybe is part of a wall, protrudes from some other piece of furniture or place.
And you can see that you probably know examples of chairs that don't have any legs. For instance, the beanbag chair doesn't have any legs. The person who thought about the beanbag chair and came up with the idea of having it perhaps thought, as a starting point, how do I come up with something that doesn't have any legs? You might think, as we are sitting here, what else can I sit on? What else do I sit on? How often have you seen a little group of milk crates, for instance, around a back door or on a building site or something, and immediately saying, well, this is where the guys sit to have a smoke, or a farmers' union iced coffee, product placement. So if you begin to think about what assumptions you're making in your task, particularly as you've chosen it because it's something that you're interested in and you're passionate about, perhaps it's a political situation, perhaps it's something that a personal friend or relative, a member of your family is involved in, then you probably are making quite a lot of assumptions about it. You might have a black and white view of it, that this is right and that's wrong. So you have to really begin to question, what assumptions am I making about this? What am I taking for granted? What am I not questioning? That's why we're asking you to come up with so many questions about this, about the task that you've chosen.
Now, initially this might be difficult because we're not used to thinking in this way. We're used to accepting things for what they are, how they are. Yep. We're not used to challenging assumptions. In fact, we're actively discouraged to follow that process of challenging assumptions.
Yeah.
Look at extremes. I mean, in challenging your assumptions, look at extremes. We've mentioned a chair that maybe has 1 leg or no legs, but what about if you went to the other end of the scale and you said, well, let's have a chair that has 100 legs.
Yeah.
So that in actual fact, maybe an idea that comes from that is that the actual legs, in fact, become the chair.
Right.
And so that you can see that unless you put yourself in a position to actually push the possibilities, look at the extremes, then you're not going to be able to look at this thing other than how you normally see it.
So when we're looking at chairs, we're assuming certain things about chairs. When we think about it instead of being chairs and think about it as being seating from a different point of view, you can see we come up with different solutions to the problem. This is what we're asking you to do.